Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers pounded the Giants 8-2 in their last game before the trade deadline. We're going to talk about this win, which was a total team effort, and we're going to talk about some of these rumors about the trade deadline, some of the stuff that's already happened, and some of the stuff that might happen today. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you'll never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time watching or listening, I am Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue. And the smart fans perspective on the boys in blue right now is, they won another game. What else is new? It's just what the Dodgers do these days, Vince, you know?
The Dodgers are very good. They follow up a great month of July with a great start to August, and something you're not used to seeing the Dodgers do in San Francisco. You know, even when they have won games in the past, you don't really remember one where they kind of dominated from start to finish. And this one was especially nice because they beat, well, I threw in nice the number of wins they have now. That was subconsciously, I think. But either way, they beat Logan Webb, who had dominated the Dodgers thoroughly last year, a little bit earlier this year. And yeah, they knocked him out. And I don't think we're going to see the Dodgers in the postseason, so I don't think we're going to see Logan Webb too many times the rest of the year. But it was just good to see. And again, in that stadium where home runs don't really happen, the Dodgers hit some home runs, the Dodgers scored some runs some other ways, and the pitching staff held it down. And it was just fun to watch.
Yeah, it's actually the first game in 10 games between the Dodgers and Giants this year that the road team won. And hopefully the Dodgers can make that 4 out of 13 in the next few days because clearly the Dodgers are a better team than the Giants right now. And sometimes that matters in baseball, sometimes it doesn't. But again, like just like we talked about with Colorado, going into that series, you're like, okay, just split this series and we'll call it good. I almost feel the same way with the Giants. Not quite as much as I will with the Padres. Like, really, you're knocking games off the schedule as much as anything else. And so obviously I want the Dodgers to win this series. I really want them to sweep the Giants, but I'd be satisfied with a 3-1 series, but I'd be okay with the 2-2. Like deep down inside, I wouldn't say it out loud, even though I just did, but you know, because you knock 4 games off the schedule without the Giants gaining any ground. And when you play the Padres, just kind of split a series or, you know, do your best. Even if you win 1 out of 3 in a series against the Padres, guess what? It took the Padres 3 games to gain 1 game on you. And that's not going to get the job done. And as we talked about yesterday, nothing's going to get the job done. The Dodgers are going to win the division. But, you know, it's still fun to beat the Giants. I think I talked about that a couple weeks ago, how it's a little bit different feeling to beat the Giants. And in this game, like, I think if you put it up for a vote, who was the offensive player of the game, I think you'd get multiple votes for at least 3 different players. You know, James Outman on base 4 more times, scored a few runs, made a nice play in the outfield. Freddie Freeman had a couple more hits. Of course, Will Smith had a pair of RBI doubles. Trey Turner extended his hitting streak with a home run. Max Muncy hit the huge home run after Andrew Heaney gave up a run, only his second run of the year in the first inning. Max Muncy came up in the top of the second and put the Dodgers on top and put them on top for good. You know, back in before you were born, Vince, there for a couple of years in the 80s, there was a stat called game-winning RBIs. And it was actually on the back of baseball cards. And Max Muncy got the game-winning RBI, according to that stat, because he put the Dodgers in the lead for good. And so, you know, all in all, it was just a really, really good team effort offensively and, you know, pitching too, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, like I mentioned, going up against Webb and Heaney gives up that run on a, you know, couple of tough, good play by Muncy, didn't quite get there fast enough in terms of getting it out, and then got squeezed maybe a little bit on that walk where the run scored. And you're thinking, okay, 1 run, you're thinking, okay, let's keep it to 1 or 2 runs. Hopefully they get Webb out in the 5th or 6th, and then they can get to the Giants bullpen. But, Max Muncy put a good swing on a ball, and it seemed like they had a better plan than they've ever had before against Webb. Maybe, I don't know, anytime you see something like this against a guy that's really done well against you, you think maybe he was tipping pitches, but, that might just be a matter, discrediting the Dodgers a little bit. But either way, everyone coming out to hit, and even when 2 guys didn't hit, Bellinger and Lux, and everyone else fills in around them. James Outman continues to put his name in Dodgers record books and put his name next to people that we haven't heard from a long time. I think Casey Stengel is one of the guys he tied, or first person to do something as a Dodger since then. So, yeah, he's continuing to do well, and he's from the Bay Area. He talked about it after the game, how it felt being out there, and he said it was kind of surreal. It took him a few innings to kind of get into it. And then, he said that the juices got going once he heard the Dodgers getting booed. And, he grew up a Giants fan. Now he's on the Dodgers side. And it's always fun to see that kind of flip. We saw it with Jock Peterson. We've seen it with others before. But yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Being compared or doing something that Casey Stengel did as a player. Casey Stengel, you look at me, I have a lot of gray hair. Casey Stengel got fired because he was too old to be a manager 15 years before I was born. And so I think it was 1912 that Casey Stengel did something as a rookie. He's also up there with Yasiel Puig in some records, which isn't as long ago, but we remember Puig Mania when he came up. James Outman is not going to have this a 900 on base percentage or whatever for his career, but it's fun while it's lasting. It was fun for this when he grew up a Giants fan, and so doing this at home, he had a lot of friends and family in the crowd, and just a great time for him. And then on pitching side, Andrew Heaney, that first inning kind of did him in. He was still on a pitch count, and we talked last time after his last start. A pitch count doesn't always mean 75 pitches, but these first couple starts it has. And Heaney said himself, well, when you throw 30 pitches in the first inning, you're not likely to last very long in the game, no matter what your pitch count is. And he would have loved to go 5 innings, but he got through 4. And I thought it was impressive that he settled down and got through 4, because like I said, when you throw 30 in the first inning and your pitch count 75, it's like, well, that's a 2.5 innings worth. And so getting through 4 was big. And then the bullpen, Chris Martin gave up a meaningless home run in his Dodgers debut. He actually looked pretty good other than that, though. And everybody else was basically lights out. And you can't, it's funny. I was thinking about this today, Vince. Everybody's talking about the Dodgers need a pitcher. In the next segment, we're going to talk about the fact that Frankie Montas got traded. It's kind of, so no Luis Castillo, no Frankie Montas. Oh yeah, the Dodgers lead the majors in our ERA. And so all this stuff about, and that's with Dustin May and Walker Buehler coming back. So, obviously you'd always want as much pitching as you can get for the postseason, but there's some signs that the Dodgers might be okay pitching wise.
Yeah, and that's what we've kind of talked about the last week or so, is the Dodgers are in a good spot. If they could make 0 trades tomorrow and still be, top 2, top 3 World Series contender, and especially in the odds and everything else, they have all that stuff. It's just, you're kind of, I guess, safeguarding is kind of maybe the word to use if you go after a pitcher that's top tier. Luis Castillo, Frankie Montas slot in at 1-2, depending on how you feel and who's healthy in this Dodgers rotation. So that pushes everyone back a little bit. You're safeguarding against Gonsolin struggling and not really finding his groove. You're safeguarding against Kershaw and his health and his back, against Buehler and May and them coming back, and Tyler Anderson keep pitching how he is, even Heaney keep pitching how he is. So it's a little bit of a safeguard. But in the end, the Dodgers have the guys that can do it. And as they showed, they did it. They've been doing it, and they continue to do it. And at some point, it's not just an anomaly, or it's not just a hot stretch. It's, okay, these guys are good. And if it happens to be good all season and falter in October, there's really nothing they can do about it. And, if you could trade for somebody like Yu Darvish, who did pretty well for the Dodgers, pretty well in the first couple rounds, and then faltered there in the last round. So you never know what's going to happen. But obviously the Dodgers are going to be in on some guys, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But at the very least, they're not desperate, which is maybe going to be the reason it's already cost them, or will cost them some players here in the next however many hours we got left. But it's a good spot to be in to where you don't need to make a trade. You're kind of just improving along the margins or going for a big swing.
Yeah. And like you said, the Dodgers don't need to make a trade. They may not make a trade today, but they did already make one trade. And we're going to talk about that when we come back, along with other things that happen trade deadline related. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. And please keep it Locked On Dodgers. If you haven't tried Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And there's a new flavor. It is delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, Built has done it again. I'm not blowing smoke up your behind on this. Built Bar Puffs, cookie dough chunk puffs, whatever you want to call them, they are delicious. I had one just a couple hours ago, and oh man, they're good. It's the Built Puff, which is like a chocolate covered marshmallow, and this has little chunks of cookie dough on top of it. It is everything you could want. It's delicious, and then when you realize this is healthy, how am I getting away with this? And it's just remarkable. They're only 160 calories, have 15 grams of protein in them. You know, if you haven't tried these yet, you need to do it. So go get a cookie dough chunk Built Puff. Whatever you order, whether it's Built Bars, Built Puffs, whatever, make sure you use promo code LOCK15 at built.com and you will get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, we want to thank you again for listening to Locked On Dodgers, making us your first listen every day. Today is the trade deadline, and Locked On MLB has all the breakdowns. Locked On Dodgers will have rapid reactions to any move made. Subscribe now to Locked On Dodgers on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. We are going to be breaking it down for you, whether that is a lot of trades or very few trades or no trades. We're going to break it down. Hopefully there's going to be some big trades to talk about. So Vince, the Dodgers did make one trade already. That was trading Garrett Clevinger to the Rays, which was kind of interesting. In the original trade, when the Dodgers got Garrett Clevinger, it was a 3-team trade that included the Rays. I think the Rays sent Alvarado to the Phillies, and the Phillies sent Clevinger to the Dodgers, and the Dodgers sent someone to the Rays. Actually, I don't know if the Dodgers ever did. I think it was a player to be named later, and I don't remember ever hearing who that player was. Maybe they sent Cash to the Rays. Anyway, they've now sent Clevinger to the Rays for a young 18-year-old player in the Dominican Summer League right now named Germán Tapia. Don't know much about him. Really, the story of this is Garrett Clevinger was on the 40-man roster and doesn't have a clear role going forward with the Dodgers, which makes him ripe for, let's move him along. And so this was clearly, here's a guy on a 40-man roster. Give us somebody who we won't have to put on our 40-man roster for a while. And, we'll take a lottery ticket, obviously knowing the Dodgers player development system. Who knows? Germán Tapia may turn into a great player, but they cleared a spot on the 40-man roster. Whether they need that at the trade deadline to add, a major league player, or if they just will need it when they activate Walker Buehler or Dustin May or Blake Treinen or any of these guys who are currently on the 60-day IL. Dodgers are going to need to clear up some 40-man spots, and that was basically the point of this move, I think.
Yeah, the Dodgers sent Dylan Paulson to the Rays, so not Cash, but yeah.
I might have heard that name once. I don't remember.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's basically, like you said, it's clearing a 40-man spot, whether it's for Dustin May, Edwin Rios, or someone when they come back off the 60-day, or whether it's for a trade that's coming here in the next day or so. Garrett Clevinger didn't really have a role on this team. He's behind Price. He's behind Vesia. He's behind Ferguson. He's not really going to be a guy. The Dodgers could trade for a reliever. The Dodgers could trade for a starter. Andrew Heaney might go down. Tyler Anderson could go down to a relief role. You never know. So he was just buried on the depth chart, not going to get a spot. And, for the Dodgers, 40-man roster spots are very prime territory at this time. And that's all it was.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be interesting, just talking about 40-man roster moves coming up. Dave Roberts said on Monday, Dustin May is probably going to need 2 more rehab starts, which means May is probably being activated in the next couple weeks. Blake Treinen said his shoulder is totally healed. Now it's just building up stamina and building up the muscles around it to make sure that there's no setbacks. And so, reading between the lines there, Blake Treinen is probably back in the next couple weeks. and Walker Buehler isn't too far behind. Edwin Rios is already at a rehab stint, which means he's back in the next couple of weeks unless there's a setback. So yeah, a lot to happen. And Edwin Rios, maybe this is a good segue into the trade deadline stuff because I don't know, Vince. I remember when the Dodgers were looking into getting Mookie Betts, and I kind of expected Edwin Rios to be in that trade. And I think I still kind of expect Edwin Rios to be the kind of, major league player who the Dodgers might include in if they do pull off a blockbuster trade. It wouldn't shock me to see if the Dodgers pull off a Juan Soto trade to see Edwin Rios going to the Nationals because he is a guy who can step in and contribute basically immediately. He's got a lot of team control left. He's very good. He's a proven major leaguer, but he's also probably not going to start a ton of games for the Dodgers. And having him coming off the bench is useful. But with the Dodgers, having the emergence of Trace Thompson and Jake Lamb and now James Outman, it's like, I don't know that Edwin Rios, I love Edwin Rios, but he might be expendable and a guy who has more value to a team like the Nats than to the Dodgers,
Yeah, it's possible, or even for like another deal for like a reliever or something like that. You can see that, James Outman, even if he hadn't come up and done what he's done the last couple of days, he was a guy that, maybe the Dodgers could have brought up earlier in the year just to show a little bit and see, show some teams like, hey, this is a guy that can fill in right now if you really want him, or can be a guy here in the next year that can play outfield and maybe give you some hit tools. The Marlins have been looking for an outfielder that can hit for a while now, so maybe that's what the Pablo Lopez rumor, maybe he's something involved there. Edwin Rios could be involved there. Everyone's looking for a guy that can hit for power. And for the Dodgers, like depending what they go out and do or depending how things go, they will have to clear out some more 40-man spots. So that's another one where Edwin Rios might just be the casualty of that, where the Dodgers are trading only one or two guys from the 40-man, but they're getting one or two guys back, but they know they're going to need to clear spots for some other guys. It's just a matter of, oh, well, he doesn't fit anymore, and that's the way it goes. Ultimately, without really having somebody, I guess, at third base, like for the future, other than, Miguel Vargas as a prospect coming up, that could be one way they keep him around. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up going somewhere or get, net the Dodgers like a small reliever or something.
Yeah. And, obviously we've heard that the Nats are looking for prospects and major league players if they do trade Juan Soto. I would definitely prefer an Edwin Rios type over a Gavin Lux type. I feel like anything that takes away a current starter from the Dodgers kind of lessens the return for Soto simply because it's, obviously Soto's going to take at bats from somebody anyway. And, but, really the only two people you would actually say offensively that you'd be okay with trading, including in a trade for Soto, are Bellinger and Muncy, but they both actually bring a ton of value defensively that Soto, for all the value he would bring, defense is not among those, and so, I mean,
hey, there's somebody out at the plate last night.
He's got a good arm. Yep. And he's still, according to defensive runs saved or outs above average, one of those, he's the worst outfielder in baseball. So, he's got a lot of good qualities though, and I would love to have him. But yeah, I'd much rather trade a Rios type than Gavin Lux or someone like that, a young actual starter. I want to ask you, Vince, this tweet that you and I both saw from Mike Rodriguez of Univision. And he's not verified on Twitter. He has 3,600 followers. Seems to be who he says he is. Although his bio says MLB insider, broadcaster, and analytics for the Chicago Cubs and Chicago White Sox in Spanish, reporter for Univision Deportes. Just a kid from, and then I don't recognize that flag. I know it's not the Mexican flag, but beyond that, Latin American flags, I am somewhat unfamiliar, but I don't know. He's not necessarily a guy who would expect to have this news, but he tweeted out, source, Dodgers are close to acquiring Juan Soto from Nationals. They are talking intensely, Padres and Cardinals still on the talk. That was, as we're recording this, that was 9 hours ago. And then we saw another tweet from another person who's not really an insider and doesn't even have their own name on the account. But that person said Dodgers and Nationals have agreed on a Juan Soto trade, but the Nationals are going to make Juan Soto one more extension offer before they pull the trigger on the trade. I put a lot less stock in that one because that person basically, if you're not willing to put your name on your Twitter account, I'm not likely to totally believe what you say. But this one from Mike Rodriguez, I don't know. What do you think, Vince?
Yeah, so this guy, Mike, I kind of came to in the off season. He got a few things right. I know for walk off my job, we used him as a source a couple times, and he was right a couple times, and then I think he gets a little bit excited or whatever his sources are, and I think he just starts throwing a lot of stuff at the wall sometimes. But what that is in his bio is a Dominican flag, so which means that he is Dominican like Juan Soto is. So there could be some sources in that realm. If anything, it's a little bit contradictory to what everyone else has said, where the Dodgers are. Everyone else has kind of said the Dodgers are lurking, the Dodgers are lurking, the Dodgers are lurking. But as we saw last year, the Dodgers were lurking. Ken Rosenthal said that the Padres were about to get Scherzer, and then a few hours later, the Dodgers had Scherzer and Trey Turner. So it's one of those where I think the Dodgers keep it pretty close to the vest. So whatever the sources are from other people are maybe to the player. We know Heyman has the insight to Boris. Heyman's kind of been the guy that said the Dodgers were lurking. So it's one of those where I think our buddy Pat Dwyer kind of mentioned it is, or if this guy has been right for it, does have some kind of sources, he might not have, he doesn't have anything behind it other than I want to get the scoop. And he doesn't have it, no ties to agents or teams or leverage plays or anything like that. Although the people that are feeding him the information could have that in mind. So you never really know, but I take it one step above someone random saying something just because he did get a couple things right in the offseason.
That makes sense. Yeah, you mentioned the Padres are in on it. We're going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk a little bit about how happy it would make me to get Juan Soto, not just for getting Juan Soto, but also to make Javi from Locked On Padres sad. So thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. All right, Vince, we are back. One last segment. Still talking about Juan Soto here. Yeah, I mean, the Padres, everybody is kind of in agreement that if Juan Soto gets traded today, it's going to be either the Dodgers, Cardinals, or Padres who get him. We saw a report that the Cardinals are reluctant to include Dylan Carlson and top prospects. Basically, they're saying, pick a lane, Nats. Do you want prospects or do you want big leaguers? And yeah, I mean, whoever gets Soto, if somebody gets him, it's going to be a huge haul that they have to give up. And the Padres, they went out on Monday and they got Josh Hader from the Brewers. You and I had talked yesterday about Hader as a possible under the radar target for the Dodgers. I did mention Josh Hader is having by far the worst season of his career, but really, if you look at his actual game logs, he had 3 terrible games, and other than that, he's been basically your regular Josh Hader this year. And the guys they gave up to get Hader, it was Tyler, Trevor. There's 3 Rogers. I think this was the twin name Taylor. Basically, they swapped closers and said, "Hey, Brewers, here's also 3 young guys to get us to get your closer for our closer." They gave up to Nelson Lamet. They finally gave up on that project and a couple prospects, but nobody who would have been really involved in the Soto trade. So they're still definitely involved in Soto talks. I don't know, Vince. Did you see Jaime Harin's tweet earlier today? Jaime Harin tweeted out basically saying the Dodgers need to get Soto, not just because Soto's really good, but because the Padres are after him. And, the Soto going to the Padres would be double bad for the Dodgers because it means he didn't go to the Dodgers and he is going to the Padres. And, the problem with all this, we've talked about how the Dodgers are definitely going to win the division. They've basically locked that up. But once you get to the postseason, a Padres team with Josh Hader closing and Juan Soto batting, early high in the order with Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis, that's a team that could be scary in the postseason. And and that was kind of Jaime Jarrin's point was we're not just thinking about the regular season here. You're thinking about playing them in a postseason series, and that could make the Padres a scary team. And I don't know. In general, I'm opposed to that kind of, reactionary trade or just, trading for a guy just to keep somebody else from getting him. But when it's Juan Soto, the impact he could have on a short playoff series, I don't know. Jaime Jarrin's kind of got a point there,
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what it came down to last year as well when the Dodgers got Scherzer, kind of took Scherzer out from under the Padres was yeah, they got Scherzer, but also the Padres didn't get Scherzer. The Padres, probably still would have finished third. Maybe they would have got into a playoff spot if they had Scherzer, who knows? But it's a matter of, and we've seen this before with trying to just getting guys in order so someone else can get those guys. And the reason now that I want Juan Soto so bad is mainly that reason, because if the Cardinals or Padres get Soto, yeah, it's not going to matter in the regular season, but those are two people the Dodgers could play in the playoffs, and Juan Soto, plays a big factor. Now the Dodgers, have played Juan Soto in the postseason before. He had one of the big home runs off Kershaw. The Dodgers lost that series, but it just goes to show that it doesn't really matter if there's a guy that can have even that's one big at bat. Even if Juan Soto had gone all over the series in Game 5 when it mattered, he came up with the big hit, and that's kind of what it comes down to. So that's mainly the reason I want the Dodgers to get Soto, other than it's Juan Soto. But also, it's also hard because the Padres are desperate. AJ Preller just comes off as desperate no matter what. The Padres are desperate. They are more likely probably willing to part with an extra prospect or whatever it takes to get them. Cardinals, not so much, but they also are in a spot where, they only have this kind of run left in them right now. Arenado could, in theory, opt out. Him and Goldschmidt are having really good seasons. It's Yachty's last season, Pujols last season. Maybe they'll get desperate because of that and try to go after it. Whereas the Dodgers don't have that desperation, so that's the main reason I think, okay, he's not going to come to LA. But then the other part is Dodgers have a good track record of prospects coming up and playing well. Padres, not so much. Cardinals have a pretty good track record as well. So maybe it's a matter of the Nationals. Okay, Padres, you gave me all these prospects, but you guys never really pan out. The Cardinals and Dodgers have a bunch of prospects, but those guys usually do pan out. So maybe that's a matter of, I'm going to go to at least one of those two.
Yeah, I hadn't made that connection, but it would be kind of funny if Josh Hader, Juan Soto, and Trent Grisham all ended up on the same team together after how that 2019 wild card game went. I don't know, funny in a good way or a bad way. But yeah, I'd rather have Hader and Grisham on the same team together and Juan Soto, beating them for the Dodgers like he did in 2019 in that wild card game. I want Juan Soto. Like, I know there's part of me that's scared about, what it would do to the farm system. And there's always the fear, especially for Dodger fans, of giving up the next Pedro Martinez for the next Delino to Shields and all that. But I trust Andrew Friedman. I think he can get it done and keep the guys who the Dodgers value the most highly, or at least a lot of them. And yeah, Juan Soto for 2.5 years would be a big, big acquisition. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I guess Frankie Montas got traded to the Yankees by the A's, which basically means it's really just Pablo Lopez or somebody that nobody's really talking about if the Dodgers are going to add a starting pitcher.
Yeah, Molly's still out there, but I wouldn't put him very high on the Dodgers.
Yeah, the one reason Tyler Molly might be an option is because he's been relatively bad this year, and so the cost would probably be low. And he does have good stuff, so he's definitely a potential project, but that might be more of an off-season thing for the Dodgers rather than a pennant race thing. Trying to fix a starting pitcher during the season might not be their style. So yeah, maybe we're going into it with, the fact is you can win games. You win games by scoring more runs than the opposing team. And there's a lot of ways to do that, including scoring a bunch of runs and not allowing very many runs. And the Dodgers have been really good at both of those things. Adding Juan Soto would make them better at scoring a bunch of runs. And the pitching, getting Dustin May and Walker Buehler back might even help them be even better at not allowing very many runs. And so this is, I'm not going to make predictions. I'm no Dave Roberts in guaranteeing a World Series championship, but there are things about this team that I could see us looking back in November and thinking, well, of course the Dodgers won the World Series. They were the best team in baseball. It was who was going to beat them. Even though the Yankees have almost as good a record as the Dodgers right now, the fact is, the Yankees are being carried by Aaron Judge and, and maybe some pitching
and good health.
Good health. That's kind of they've had a lot of good luck in a few different ways, and that can go away. And, they have definitely done everything they could. They got Montas, they got Andrew Benintendi, they got a couple other, they made like 3 trades.
Cubs, yeah,
that's right.
Trevino from the A's too.
Yeah. So they are going for it. But there are things about this Dodger team that make me think, man, this team, especially because the Dodgers are only going to have to play the Yankees or the Astros at most. Those teams, they're battling for each other to see who gets to the World Series for the American League. And the Dodgers are only going to have to play one of them at most. And so I feel like the Dodgers are the class of the National League. And, obviously they have to keep doing it on the field. And I'm not going to make any guarantees. And in case you're listening to this and getting worried, don't worry. I'm not on the team. You don't have to worry about the Dodgers getting complacent because I said I think they are a lock for the World Series because that's okay. What I say doesn't affect anything except for your enjoyment. And that's why you listen to Locked On Dodgers every day and make us your first listen. I got nothing else to say today, right, Vince? You?
Real quick. So Pablo Lopez mentioned, we kind of said, the Marlins are looking for hitters. Dodgers can fill that if they need to. He comes with an extra year as well of team control. So there's something there. Might cost a little bit more than the Dodgers have paid for guys in the past that were rentals, but it's still a good move. And then they were linked to Ian Happ, who I just called Zach McKinstry Ian Happ Light, which means Ian Happ is Zach McKinstry plus.
Zach McKinstry heavy.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, both those guys fit. The Dodgers could still, JD Martinez still out there. They could go get a bat. And every year we're surprised when the Dodgers make a move that we don't expect, and that hasn't happened yet. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to just sit at my laptop for all day tomorrow and wait to see who the Dodgers get.
Yeah, if there is a big trade, we may go live on YouTube to talk about it. Vince has a day job where he's also covering this. And so depending on how that's working, it may just be me. But one way or another, worst case scenario, we're going to be here with you tomorrow morning to talk about the trade deadline stuff. But if there's something big, we're going to try to get a little bit more immediate reaction in a way that you guys can interact with us one way or the other, whether that's a Twitter space talking about it or a live YouTube or something. So thank you all for listening to Locked On Dodgers, for watching us, whatever you're doing. Thanks for doing that every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. If you're not watching or listening every day, we would love if you added 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you're looking for a second listen today, check out Locked On MLB. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. If you have friends or family who love the Dodgers as much as you do, please tell them about the show. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I'm on Twitter at Snydog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text is 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.